Today on Words and Numbers, I've got some interesting public opinion polling on presidential approval.
New York ATM machines are spitting out free money.
The foolishness of the week is a real corker this weekend. We've got a United States congressman who has apparently not read the United States Constitution.
For the main episode, is the economy in recession or is it doing well? And the answer is yes.
Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. Check it out at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
So what's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
I've got some news from New York City. Apparently, for several days, New York City's ATMs were spitting out free money. It took about 3 days for people to figure out what was going on and shut them down. But by the time they had, the ATMs had spit out a total of about $17 million in cash.
This isn't like last time when people were depositing fake checks and taking money out.
Oh, no. You think that, that just happened not that long ago. You think that people would have figured out something, right? Oh, no. This is something different.
A malfunction that causes money to fly out of that magic slot.
Well, there's a malfunction somewhere. I'm not entirely sure it's the ATM. And what's noteworthy here is that the article, which this comes from the New York Times, keeps referring to this as fraudulent use. Use of the ATM.
How on earth is it fraudulent if the ATM just spits out money?
Well, you could make the argument in the case of the checks. People were kiting checks, right? And clearly, that's illegal unto itself.
That's clearly fraud. Clearly.
But this has a twist to it. What happened here is New York City has a summer youth employment program. It's actually I believe it's the sixth largest program of its type in the country, where they employ, youth and to do various things, but they pay them with what would amount to debit cards. Uh-oh. So you take this card to the ATM and you can pull the money out, and whoever it is back in the home office in New York City Hall refreshes it every couple weeks with whatever your pay is. Well, what happened was there was some foul up somewhere, and this is where I kind of question the use of the term fraudulent, because the foul up had to be, if not at the ATM bank level, it would have occurred back at whoever it was that was recharging the cards, but it was set up so that you could take your ATM card and pull out as much as you want. And there were limits, like $200 per transaction. But you could do as many transactions as you want. And there were reports of people standing there for hours, just putting the card in, take $200 out, put the card back in, take $200 out. Kept going on and on and on.
And I would never have left the machine until it was literally out of money. And as soon as they put money back into it, I'd be right back there doing the same thing. Yeah.
And I'm saying $200, but it says here that in a lot of cases, people are walking away with $40,000, $20,000 in cash.
It's pretty solid money. Some people, dare I say it, think of that kind of money as a year's salary.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, this is actually making me angry. We have to move on.
Well, what kind of made me angry is the repeated use of this word fraudulent. Now, I'm not advocating, clearly when you know that there's something wrong with it, the honest person would stop taking the money out. But look, this doesn't seem to be, if there's a fault here, it seems to me it's on the end of the people who are recharging the cards.
You would actually stop taking money out?
Yeah, I would, but I'm really risk averse. And I would, and don't think, I would like to say, well, I would stop taking money out because it's the right thing to do. No, I would stop taking out because there's a camera on there and I know that it's going to come back and get me.
I'd take that money home and bury it in my backyard where nobody would ever find it. But anyway, we move on to Donald J. Trump, who I was cruising around Facebook and Twitter yesterday, as I am wont to do. A lot more on Twitter lately than Facebook, but so it goes. At James R. Harrigan, if you're out there. And somebody asserted that Donald Trump had like a 58% approval rating. And I thought to myself, that can't be right. So I headed over to Pew, the Pew Research, because their data is pretty good. And generally, presidential opinion data, regardless of the source, is all going to be in about the same ballpark, right? They all get it.
It is, yeah.
They all get it pretty much the same. And the correct answer right now for President Trump is 38%.
Yeah.
He has a 38% approval rating, which is dreadful. Now, Congress is in the 20s, and the Democratic Party writ large is at 20. So we've got a bigger problem than this would first appear to be. I just want to point out that there are so many people who are fact resistant that I don't know what to tell them. What kind of moron would you have to be to assert, even for a second, that the president's approval rating is 20 points higher than it actually is without going and looking it up? It's easy to find. It takes 1 second to look it up.
I knew that it was wrong, not because of anything to do with Donald Trump, but because I don't think any president has had an approval rating that high, apart from maybe the day after he was elected.
George W. Bush, right after 9/11.
Right after 9/11, yes, you're right. Yeah, and that's probably the last time we ever saw something that high.
Prior to that,
for either party.
Prior to that, it was Reagan.
Yeah.
Right. So we're looking at unicorns here. You don't get that high in American politics. We are Sears on one corner, Macy's on the other, fighting over that last little bit. Right. This is why McDonald's and Burger King are always in the same neighborhood. It explains a lot of human behavior. Right. Everybody trends toward the middle, regardless of what we're talking about. Mattress stores are right next door to each other. Right. How ridiculous is that? But they have learned that's how you make money.
And it's all for the same reason. I mean, why are Burger King and McDonald's in the same place? Because that's where the customers are. Why are the Democratic and Republican parties the way they are? Because that's who votes.
That's the voters. Those are the voters they need.
Yeah.
Right. The hardcore voters, they stick around no matter what. They have to fight over that last 15% or so. It might even be 10 or 12 to see how things will swing. But, there are outlets like Pew where you can go and look things up before you make a fool of yourself online. And you should really do that. Now, the sad thing is that anybody listening to this podcast already knows that.
Get words and numbers on civil.com and on Civil's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.
But I'm not going to make a big dent here, but I did get to vent my spleen. Speaking of which, we're on to the foolishness of the week. And there is a gentleman, a representative named Andy Ogles, which is really an unfortunate name in a lot of ways. Andy
Where's
Ogles,
he from?
I can't remember. His name is one of Tennessee. He's from Tennessee's 5th district. And his name is a sentence. Andy Ogles. A particularly pleasant sentence, but what the hell? He tweeted a couple of days ago, in all seriousness. Now, I want you to remember, this is in all seriousness. Give Trump a third term, he says. Give him a peace prize and let him run D.C. as long as he wants.
God.
A United States congressman decided that the two-term limit to uphold
the Constitution. He clearly didn't read the thing.
Or he did and didn't care. Either way, it's completely unacceptable. And, I've got two things to say about this. The people in Tennessee's 5th district should be up in arms, right? This is their representative. They should be out with pitchforks. And I haven't heard that they are, because they're Republicans and he's a Republican, so the hell with it. And that's how you lose a republic. Right there. Yep. That's how you lose a republic. And why are his fellow representatives not expelling him from the body? They could do that. Mm-hmm. The House of Representatives can expel any member for any reason it wants.
Do you know the details? Does it take a supermajority to do that?
Yeah, I don't know the details off the top of my head. It's not. I don't think it's a simple minority, but because the House makes its own rules, and that's a rule that they have made over time. So no, I don't know. It's been used from time to time.
Let me underline here. I think this is appalling. It doesn't have anything to do with President Trump and my desire for him to have or not to have a third term. It has everything to do with the fact that this is not permitted by the plain words of the Constitution. Now, if you want to change it, let's talk about a constitutional amendment.
That's right. And this is settled. I don't know why morons like Steve Bannon keep at it, right? Saying, because his terms are non-consecutive, for some reason they don't count. What the hell is that? That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
The plain words on the page are obvious, and that we've got a representative spouting this nonsense is horrific to me.
And I would call out a warning to his constituents, and I can understand where you're coming from, that if you are particularly enamored of Donald Trump and you want him to have a third term, your tendency would be to let this pass. But I warn you, when we ignore the plain words on the page of the Constitution to serve our ends, the next guy who comes along is going to be ignoring the plain words to serve his. And that would take the form, for example, for our friends in Tennessee, which I know is a right-leaning state, the next administration just deciding that the plain words of the Second Amendment don't apply.
Well, they decide that all the time.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of pushback, right? But this is how this starts. You let something small like this slip, and before you know it, other things are slipping. And then you don't have a constitution.
And you don't have a republic.
Yeah.
And we are at a point in our history where that's a very real possibility. If we haven't, I know our friend and frequent guest, Clark Neely, thinks we've already crossed that line. And, I think he may be right, but there may still be time to save it. But this kind of nonsense coming from on high has just got to stop.
And the reason you want a republic, specifically a constitutional republic, is to protect the minority.
That's right.
Because if you don't have that, then it's whatever 51% of the people want, that's what we're going to get wall to wall.
Yep. And that is a prescription for disaster.
Yeah.
The founders knew it. We both know it. And everybody who thinks about these things knows it.
And if you are tempted to say, well, that doesn't apply to me, I'm not in the minority, stop and think about all the... Well, not today, but also think about all the groups of which you are a member. So I'm obviously a white male. In that sense, I'm not in a minority, but I'm a Catholic. In that sense, I am.
You may find this hard to believe, Ant. You have just made James Madison's argument from 1787. Exactly.
Really? See how smart I am, James?
Right down to the point. No, this is how smart James Madison was. But you can show off how smart you are by talking about this recession business that we're probably overdue to get to.
Words and Numbers is part of the Civil Network. Civil is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At Civil, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. Civil seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, Civil offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to Civil will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. Yeah, so the question is...
Can you start with a question from the rabble? What the hell is a recession anyway?
That's probably a good place to start, because the thing that people keep repeating, it's not correct, but it's not too bad either, is that a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative real GDP growth. Geez, I'm sorry I even said those words. Here's what that means. 2 consecutive quarters of the economy producing less than it produced in the previous quarter.
Well, that is negative GDP growth, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but people get squirrely when you start saying stuff like that.
All right, fair enough. So there is a technical definition.
Yeah, there's technical definition. Now that isn't it, right? Because that's the thing that people say, well, that's what a recession is. It turns out that the National Bureau of Economic Research has a whole bunch of criteria that they look at, and they're the official ones that say, verily, this is or is not a recession. They've got a whole bunch of things they look at, and if you look at all those things and all the times that NBER has said, yes, this is a recession, and no, that isn't a recession, what they have said tends to match up with this rule of thumb of 2 consecutive quarters of declining economic activity. But it's partially coincidental that it lines up. That's not the official definition.
Yeah, I would expect it to line up more often than not.
Oh, it does. It does. I think it's like 85% of the time or something, right? So it's good enough. I would say, for the common person, think of a recession as the economy shrinking. That's the best way to think of it.
All right. So now I've got a follow-up question. Is the economy shrinking?
Yeah, and don't know. The reason we don't know goes back.
Aren't you helpful, Pumpkin? Aren't you helpful?
It goes back to an episode we did a couple of weeks ago on the Bureau of Labor Statistics and them revising their numbers. And we said at the time that the revisions are occurring because all the data doesn't come in at once. It comes in over time. By over time, I mean months to sometimes up to a year. And so it can take 6 months to a year before we're able to look back and say definitively, oh, yeah, we were in recession 6 months ago.
So NBER suffers the same problem with reality that the BLS suffers.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a problem. The problem isn't theirs in the sense that they're doing anything wrong. It's a problem of it takes time to collect data.
It's literally the problem of reality.
Yeah, it is. And this is probably a good time to say to the side, those who would put their faith in policymakers, well, let's increase government spending to pull us out of recession, or let's mess with the money supply to do whatever it is we want to do. Keep in mind that all of those policymakers suffer from this same problem. Even if they're brilliant and they can make perfect policy decisions, they're looking through a rearview mirror. They're seeing the economy as it was 6 months ago at best.
Yeah. And that's always the problem of politics, right? They're always, and this isn't just true of economic data. This is true of social movements as well. By the time people in Congress become aware of them, it's already happened.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, they're always legislating something that's been definitively decided by the people.
Oh, I love that. You talked about this some time ago. We were talking about the civil rights movement and legalization of marijuana. And you pointed out that the politicians just jump in front of the bandwagon and say, look at what I did.
Ain't I something?
My favorite example of this is see if I can get the initials right, FSLB, Federal Labor Standards. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, with the child labor business.
With the child labor back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And people... The government passed this. The federal government passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, passed the Fair Labor Standards Act that said, that you get paid, that there's a 40-hour work week and you get paid time and a half. It's more than that, and they outlawed child labor and all of that. And everybody points to that. I shouldn't say everybody. People who are proponents of policy intervention point to that and say, look, the government finally put an end to the 60-hour work week. The government finally put an end to child labor. And if you look at the numbers the markets had done away with all of that a decade before the law ever came about.
Yeah, you get the exact same thing if you read up on the history of the civil rights movement and, oddly enough, the history of the abortion rights movement. Things were long settled. There's a great book, author named O'Brien, called The Hollow Hope. I recommend it universally. It's about people who try to get their cases to the Supreme Court, and he refers to that as a hollow hope. Right? By the time the Supreme Court puts its imprimatur on something, it's already definitively decided. Right? They're not going out into the wilderness saying, "Oh yeah, let's integrate." It was already happening. There was a move afoot across the entire country. Was there resistance to it? Of course there was. This wasn't a universal thing, but it was a thing that was going to happen whether they put their foot on it or not. And there you go.
But that makes perfect sense, because if you're a member of the Supreme Court, what's the worst thing that could happen is that you make a decision that goes against the popular conception, and everybody ignores you.
Ignores it. That's right.
And that's the end of the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court has no enforcement mechanism, none whatsoever. So careful. They can only go so far, and it was designed that way on purpose. And was it Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78 said that the Supreme Court has neither force nor will. That's a nice turn of a phrase right there. Neither force nor will. Turns out not to be entirely correct, but close enough. Anyway, but you've got to get back to this recession business.
Oh, you're going to get very right. See, I'm trying to avoid talking about it. All right, so here's the first thing is we don't know what's going on now. But what has evolved are a set of what we call nowcasts as opposed to forecast. And it is, as name would suggest, it's an attempt to use forecasting techniques to tell us what's going on right now.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and a number of the feds, the Federal Reserve is divided into districts. Each district has a I don't know what you'd call it. Headquarters isn't the right thing, but it's the central bank of that district.
Like the Bat Cave.
Right, yeah, the Bat Cave, right. So there's a Chicago Fed, a Philadelphia Fed, the Dallas Fed. It goes on and on.
Everybody's favorite is the St. Louis Fed for some reason.
The St. Louis Fed. I love the St. Louis Fed.
See, everybody says the same thing.
They provide all sorts of data. It's well arranged. It's all free. Well, it's free. It's paid for with my tax dollars. It's wonderful stuff. But I digress. I shouldn't say each of these feds, but a number of them maintain nowcasts. The New York Fed has a forecast, actually. And these are built on different things, right? Because they're econometric models. They're forecasting models. So they're necessarily going to be built differently and give different results. So the idea here is let's look at the suite of them and see if they're pointing in similar directions. I'm going to look at, for the nowcasts, I'll look at 3, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Dallas Feds, and each one of them look at different things. Chicago Fed looks at a whole bunch of things that are going on in the economy, income, employment, consumption, on and on. Philadelphia Fed looks at unemployment and payroll and GDP. Dallas Fed looks at sales, consumer sentiment, taxes. So it's all kinds of different things going on here. And if you look at those 3 for now, Chicago Fed says for the last, let's say, 4 months or so, the economy has been, how should I say, inching toward recession, but still solidly in the expansion range. So Chicago Fed would say things are getting progressively worse, but they aren't dire.
Having its cake and eating it too.
Yeah, well, we're all going to do that. We're economists, right? I started off by saying, well, yes, we are in a recession and an expansion. The Philadelphia Fed, their nowcast model, in a way says the reverse, and in a way says the same thing. They say that the economy has been getting weaker and weaker going back to January 2024. So steadily weaker, but then started to turn around last month. So kind of in this strange set of circumstances where now people more so than the past are talking about the possibility of recession. Philadelphia Fed they're not bullish on the economy, but they're less bearish than they were a month or two ago. Dallas Fed says the economy has actually been strengthening over the past couple of months. And I'm trying to look to see to compare this to. According to Dallas Fed's number, the economy is as strong now, or I should say as of last month, July, as it was, looks like roughly February of this year and November of 2024. So
not bad.
Yeah, neither of those times were anything to write home about, but they weren't recessions either.
They weren't terrible either. Let me ask you a question, though, and how idiosyncratic are the measures? Are they geographic, right? Does the Dallas Fed care more about Dallas things, or are they all looking at national things?
They're looking at national things, all of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
So
now,
one would expect that they would come up with incredibly similar conclusions. And that's not exactly the case.
Yeah, I would say the conclusions are they're not the same, but there's a lot of similarity. For example, Chicago says things are getting worse. Philadelphia and Dallas say things are getting better. But Chicago says things are getting worse, but from a pretty good standpoint. Whereas Philadelphia says things are getting better, but from a really bad standpoint.
You've stumbled. Shall I say, witlessly, which is always how you stumble, right into why people don't like or trust economists.
Yeah, and I suppose the problem here is people want a definitive answer, and a lot of times there simply isn't a definitive answer to be had.
But you know who gives them definitive answers? Politicians.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
They always know. And now, if you've followed this argument from, A to Z, you realize that when politicians give you rock solid economic answers, they're lying.
Oh, absolutely. They're lying. Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. This stuff is.
Politicians lie. Right. What film at 11? God, we've really uncovered something here, Ant.
And even when you look backwards, because you would think, all right, at some point in time, the data is set. We know what happened. We can point to it and say, historically, this is what went on. And even then, while we're much more sure than we are now, it's not entirely clear. For example, so many people were taught in high schools, I'm sure you were taught, I was, that...
I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah, that Roosevelt brought us out of the Great Depression.
Not true at all.
No, it wasn't until I was into PhD studies before I discovered that's absolutely the opposite.
Yeah, not only is it a lie, it's a fantastic lie.
Yeah, it's because of Roosevelt's policies that the Depression lasted for 10 years, as opposed to 6 months in
8
England.
Yeah, that's right.
A year in Germany.
And there you go. I mean, look, economic historians will still, in all earnestness, debate the cause of the 29 stock market crash, right? They're not settled on it. They're mostly settled on it, but they're not absolutely settled on it. And I kind of like that, actually, that people still want to dig up the past and try to figure out exactly what happened and why, because that information is incredibly valuable.
Well, it really is. It informs our policy moving forward. But I think as well, some people expect a smoking gun that you can point to this thing, and that was the reason. And it's not. With an economy is a system. There's never one thing. You're lucky if it's only a dozen things.
How many trillions of dollars change hands in the United States every year?
Good question. Because it's not GDP, it's more than that. I would guess, don't quote me, but I would guess 40 trillion.
That's how complicated it is.
Yeah, right, yeah,
right,
yeah, sure.
Right there. That's exactly how complicated it is. And I'll tell you this as well. There is literally no way to know the answer to the question that I asked.
Yes, that is correct.
you can just about know. You could be really close. You can study it for years and get very close. And then there's a bunch of dollars changing hands that you never saw.
Yeah, and I'm now going to contradict myself a little bit, because there are some things we can know, and people who don't understand the economics, or people who do understand the economics but are disingenuous, will play on this, and they'll say things like, I'm thinking about the minimum wage. They'll say things like, you can raise the minimum wage and you won't cause unemployment.
Robert Reich.
Yeah, right, for example. Now, I can tell you that's patently false.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the reason I can be so sure about that after being so unsure about all these other things is because that phenomenon is has a basis. We understand people's behavior. And given what we understand of people's behavior, if you force employers to pay more, they're going to end up unemploying some people who were previously employed.
They will always hire fewer people.
Right. So we understand how that mechanism works. Now, having said that, if you go and collect data, as some people have done, you could say, well, yes, but in this particular instance, the minimum wage went up and unemployment didn't follow. To which most economists would say, okay, that doesn't mean that the principle doesn't apply. It means that there were other things also at play that counteracted what you're seeing. Yeah.
Something else was going on. And here's the thing with the economy. Something else is always going on.
Right. Yeah.
Literally always. So, take everything you hear out of a politician's mouth with a giant grain of salt. That's good advice regardless, but it's especially good advice when we talk about economics.
Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. We work with Civil to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at Civil look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore Civil's new platform at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Yeah.
And on that happy note, you got more?
Oh yeah, I'm not at all done here.
You better hurry up.
I have not yet begun to equivocate.
you better hurry up.
The New York Fed maintains a forecast, so they're looking into the future, and they're showing their latest numbers. They're estimating a 30% chance that the economy is in recession pretty much at any given point for the next 6 months or so.
Great.
And well, yeah, I'm actually heartened by that. I'm actually somewhat surprised that it's not a higher number, because 30% chance of unemployment is, 30% chance of recession is pretty decent. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, right? But it's not Armageddon either.
Odds are it's not going to happen. I mean, in a casino, if I have a 70% advantage, I'm taking that bet literally every time.
Right. So what we're saying here is there's a 70% chance that we're not going to be in recession.
Yeah, but we won't know for a year anyway, so...
Right. See, and this is the beautiful thing about being an economist. I say all this stuff. I say it's probably even a better thing if you're a politician, because you can say all this stuff, and 3 months from now, nobody's going to remember what you said.
Yeah, except we're filming this, Ant. We're all going to remember what you said. Do you have more to say, or are we finally done now?
Let me check my notes here. Yeah, there's an interesting disconnect that's been going on I'd say it's been going on for the past year, maybe more than that. Yeah, it has to be more than that, maybe the past 3 years. And it's been caused, I think, by this sequence of events. You remember, we were both adults at 9/11, and 9/11 comes along. It's a shock to the economy. But then it goes away. And it's done, and we go through life, and there's not another major shock for a while, maybe not till the housing crisis in 2008, something like that.
2007, that's right.
We've had, since COVID, Now, they haven't been of the magnitude, with the exception of COVID, haven't been in the magnitude of 9/11, but it has been a non-stop sequence. It was COVID, then it was the lockdowns in response, and then it was this uncertainty of when the lockdowns would be released. Then it was remote work. Then it was the push to get people back into the office. Then it was the inflation of 22. And then it was the high interest rates. And now it's the tariffs. It's I don't mean to equate any of that to 9/11, but I do mean to.
Don't forget the apartment/housing crunch.
The apartment housing crunch. Yeah.
High interest rates captures that, but it deserves its own category.
Sure. And so I think American consumers have been hit with this nonstop, kind of like a low-level headache that hasn't, relieved over the course of years now.
One might call it a cavalcade of bad news.
Yeah, yeah. And because of that, I refer now to University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index. They survey consumers, every month, and their Consumer Sentiment Index is just a number. The higher the number is, the happier consumers are. And it typically, from roughly 2015 to 2020, hovered around the 95 range. Along comes COVID. Ever since COVID, it's been hovering in the 60 range. From 95, pretty constant, down to 60, pretty constant.
Yeah.
I say this is what's happened. Consumers are dealing with this nonstop business. So on the one hand, we've got the consumers being really bearish on the economy. I think more so than what the economy deserves. The economy, I would say, is doing better than what you would think, given what you see when you look at consumer sentiment.
So intuitions are probably incorrect.
Yeah, except when you look at the stock market market's up 20% year over year, almost 30% over the past 3 years.
Could be a catastrophe in the making right there.
But this is the typical stock market's up 12%, 15% on a good time, 20% up in a market like this. It's as if the consumers have this biased negative view of the economy, while the stock market has a biased positive view of the economy. I have no idea. Well, I do have an idea, but that was going to require another episode as to what's going on.
And we might well get to it, right? It's interesting enough. And I just want to say before we close up shop that I want to get back to government receipts. You might remember we talked about how in June, I believe it was, there was a surplus. And it was a small surplus, but it was a surplus nonetheless. And we promised that we would get back to that when the July numbers were in, and I'm sure they're in by now. So coming up soon on Words and Numbers, we'll get a look at that. Until then,
let me throw out one thing. When we talked about that, one of our listeners contacted me and said, a good explanation for those July figures being up was quarterly taxes being paid by businesses.
Yeah, but that's every year.
No, but they come once a quarter.
Yeah, but
and it happened.
But that's every year, and
no,
we didn't have surpluses in those other years.
June. Yeah, but that's true. I guess I was responding.
We'll get to it when we talk about it. Probably.
All right, fair enough.
Probably next time. Until then, live an interesting and varied life. Take a minute to close your eyes and enjoy the silence. And for the love of God, be nice to each other. You can do it. It'll be all right. See you soon, Aunt.
See you next time, James. Stu's falling asleep.